Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jake Spiegler, and I'd like to welcome you to our I think this is the 8th KM KSU webinar. I'm a graduate student in the master's program, and I'll be one of your facilitators over the next year. The KM KSU webinars are an open forum for anyone engaged or interested in knowledge management or knowledge sciences. In this community, we define knowledge sciences broadly and inclusively. Events and webinars are offered to expand the dialogue and also to provide exposure to people and organizations who are doing great things in this area to advance ideas and to discuss challenges. We want this to be your forum, so we encourage you to propose events, suggest topics. As we mentioned in our kickoff session, are not limited to presentations, but can be open to conversations, discussions, interviews, and so on. We're receiving many very interesting suggestions, and we have volunteers for another half dozen events. Please do keep your ideas coming. This is an open forum which operates under a Creative Commons governance model. It is also a community without formal funding, so I want to always take time to acknowledge the contributions of our team here at Kent State, including Jana Korenzico, our academic program coordinator, Nicole Stempak, one of our graduate assistants, and Denise Bedford, our Goodyear professor. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today. David Kamien is the CEO and founder of Mind Alliance Systems, the pioneer of software for information flow mapping and collaboration design. David leads the Mind Alliance team, providing knowledge management support to customers such as Rockefeller Foundation, NATO, the World Bank, New York State, and Raytheon. Prior to founding Mind Alliance, David worked as a sales professional for Marsh USA from 2000 to 2004. He drove over $100 million in sales and as a strategy of business development consultant to Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Siemens, Honeywell, Motorola, and other clients offering Homeland Security solutions. From 1995 to 2000, David's career focused on telecom and media regulatory policy, as well as internet applications. David advised the Israeli Ministry of Communications and Antitrust Authority, and worked with telecom operators and internet startups in Israel and Europe. David served in the Israeli Defense Forces as an infantry officer in the Golani Brigade, as a liaison officer to the United Nations forces. David has a law degree from the Academic College of Law in Ramat Gan and a bachelor degree from Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He is the editor of the McGraw-Hill Homeland Security Handbook, 2006-2012 editions, and the author of a forthcoming book on knowledge management. He served on a NATO research team focusing on building effective collaboration and a comprehensive approach. Born in New York, David resides in New Jersey with his wife and 2 children. So at that, I'd like to hand it over to David Kamien.
Thanks very much. Good afternoon, everyone, depending on your time zone. I hope we can make this interactive, and I don't do all the talking for the next hour. But I will try and cover many of the key areas that we focused on, and let's get started. I'll start with a quick overview of our capabilities and describe some case studies, and I'll also explain some of the software tools that we use, and I'll leave time to talk about some of the future dimensions and directions of KM that I anticipate and would like to accelerate. So we at Mind Alliance are continuously evolving a framework for designing effective collaboration and knowledge management strategies. Our approach is socio-technical. It doesn't focus on the technology alone. And we have 2 software systems that we apply in our effort to help organizations collaborate more effectively, share information more effectively, and manage knowledge more effectively. One is called Channels Analyst, and the other is called Channels Planner. We'll talk about them briefly later on. And as Jake mentioned, we've worked with government agencies, international organizations, and private companies. And we provide both consulting and technology services to these clients. Here's a quick look at some of the clients we've served. And some of our thought leadership, which has focused until recently in the Homeland Security arena, is now broadening to other areas. Most recently, we authored a strategy, co-authored a strategy for the Rockefeller Foundation. The process began with analyzing the state of information sharing, knowledge management, collaboration, access to information, and so forth. And the second phase focused on the formulation of a multi-year strategy, and we are in the process of supporting the implementation of that knowledge management strategy as we speak. So we believe that in order to achieve effective knowledge management and collaboration, you have to design it. It's not a spontaneous outcome. And a framework for designing knowledge management has to accommodate, has to address the people, process, and technology dimensions in an integrated way. And I think what you'll see over the coming presentation is that we have a fairly unique focus on the information flow per se. And we'll go into that during the presentation. Clearly, achieving the outcomes we desire requires participation from a variety of participants, not just the knowledge management professionals themselves. Our framework is in fact based on many other frameworks. It's a synthesis and addition to frameworks that include scenario planning, risk management, enterprise architecture, library science, and many other disciplines which we weave together into ours. So let's talk about that approach in a little bit more depth. We try to unite the people and process and technology across borders. We care about all flows of information, not just the inter-machine or people-to-machine flow of information, but also the interactions between people, even if they're not automatable, even if they're not mediated through some electronic means of communication. We want to be holistic. And so we believe that our approach is complementary to many other approaches. One, for example, is business process management, where often the focus is on ultimately automating a workflow. We want to be holistic and encompass interactions and processes that cannot be automated fully, or perhaps not even at all. And as I mentioned, a KM strategy has to account for the different perspectives. Management wants intelligence to support decision-making. Knowledge workers have very little time to spare, and they want to know whether a new approach will make them more collaborative, make them more productive. IT has its own interests, and knowledge management professionals have their own interests. And we think that designing effective collaboration has to account for many, many different aspects. So we've developed hundreds of questions to probe these and other areas in order to determine what the network needs to accomplish and what will make it successful. Clearly, a network of any size should have a focus. Often it needs to have a focus. It could be a focus on a problem. It needs to have participants of various kinds. And the key is figuring out how to align their interests. Even within a single organization, different departments have different interests in different technology and different processes. Their leadership, their goals, their standards that they need to comply with are different. And you need to think through what information they want to collect and generate and why and who needs it and how it needs to flow between people. You need to figure out how you're going to filter their content. What kind of common taxonomy could be developed or exists, or an ontology. How are you going to display information? Well, how are you going to build trust, possibly with face-to-face meetings? And how the KM strategy is going to align with the business strategy and the business processes. And how any collaborative environment you build is going to integrate with core business activities. So those are just a few of the hundreds of questions that you need to consider. I'll now pause and see if there are any questions, and if not, I'll continue to talk about some of the tools in our KM tool set. Any questions? Guess not. So let's continue. I'll talk about channels analyst first. So
really quick, David. I just want to mention that some of you may be muted and you might not know it, because if we're getting feedback, I go ahead and mute you, just so for the quality of the presentation. So on that note, just make sure that if you have a question, to make sure that you're not muted anymore, or you can just type it into the chat window, and we can ask it that way.
Hey, Dave, this is Dean Testa. Goodyear. I have a quick question. You mentioned connecting people even if it was not through electronic means. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. Some of the most important communication in an organization happens face-to-face in a meeting. Do we ignore that as knowledge managers? Do we not plan for that? Do we not design that into our strategy? That would be a mistake. So the face-to-face interactions, and I'll just expand that and say, you know, teleconferencing, but, you know, through means that don't capture the data and then turn it into text, they have to be addressed. So you want to ultimately achieve the flow of information by any means, the access to expertise by any means, the utilization of data by any means, and be holistic in that regard. I don't think KM managers can just focus on, you know, access to a portal or utilization of a shared space of another kind or a wiki. We have to think about any mechanism by which a knowledge worker, in all their, you know, flavors, will be enabled through data, information, knowledge, expertise, and so forth. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, at one level, and then perhaps later in your presentation you'll explain or show us how you accomplish that?
Of course. Channels Analyst is a software application, a web application that we just developed in the last few months because we realized we needed it ourselves as knowledge management consultants. We had to, at the Rockefeller Foundation and now at the World Bank, capture information about knowledge management issues and categorize that and figure out how to address these issues. And the first time around, we did it with spreadsheets, and it was just an inefficient way to go about it. So we developed an application, Analyst, to organize and structure and facilitate the process of collecting information from an organization about the information sharing, collaboration, knowledge management, etc. issues that they want to address. Now, this can be done in many different ways. We've already done it in two different ways. Once we've done it by taking, by interviewing people face-to-face, recording the interview with their knowledge, transcribing the interviews, and then taking the text and literally parsing it out into discrete issues. We've now also done this with a survey tool, where a survey was administered electronically and people responded, and then the responses about issues were brought into the system. Issues are categorized, and the client, of course, can determine the categorization that makes sense to them, including subcategories. So these are a few screenshots from Analyst showing that slicing and dicing the issues that people describe provide some insight into which are more acute. And then, of course, you can associate those issues with approaches. I wasn't able to find an approach screen that was anonymous or sanitized enough. But basically, a KM issue could be remedied by one or more approaches. So the same way you describe issues, you can describe approaches, and you can do a many-to-many mapping of the KM approaches that remedy them. Now you can also associate issues with flows, particular flows of information, or particular decisions that are undermined by the issue. Because at the end, when you stand back and look at all the issues, you want to decide where am I going to allocate my limited time, money, political capital. And you're going to want to focus on the knowledge management issues that are most acute from the perspective of the decision that you need to ensure is well-informed, or the process that's well-informed or something. The next tool, which is actually the older tool, our core product, or our flagship product, was Channels Planner. The Channels Planner is about planning and designing collaboration and getting into the specific discrete flows of information that need to be planned, and then producing checklists that can be used in training and exercises and guide the participants. So, for example, let's say you're developing an intelligence product for a senior executive or official, and that intelligence product needs to answer a certain set of questions. So, in an intelligence process, you're going to identify the priority intelligence requirements and the essential elements of information, and you're going to want to trace that to the sources of that information, whether they're in your company or outside your company. So you want to figure out whether all the information that people need is going to be provided, and going to be provided in the way and speed and manner that's required. So that's what the Channels Planner application does. It enables an organization to design the flow of information, whether it's between organizations or inside an organization, whether it's between a machine and a machine, or a human and a human, or a machine and a human, and identify preventable problems. So the inputs to this are, again, either surveys collected electronically or interviews. And the application, which you'll see in a moment, structures that information, generates a map of the interactions between the stakeholders, and traces with lines the flows of information that have been specified, and then outputs various kinds of reports for management, for training, and so forth, and an API so that this information can be utilized by other applications. So the one of the key interfaces is the modeling interface, where you can specify a task that someone needs to do and the information that person needs to receive and send. And by inputting information into those forms, a visual flow map is generated automatically, and analytics run on this map. And wherever there's red, it indicates that there is a problem detected either by the software automatically, and it detects about 100 issues, or manually recorded by a user of the system. And then, of course, you want to take action to remedy that issue. So any stakeholder that has to participate in a collaborative process has information needs, or produces information, or both, most likely. So with this application, you can get into the details as much as you, or as little as you want to, about what are the discrete elements of information, how quickly does it need to be provided, by what means of communication, governed by which policy or standard, what to do if the information is not provided, who's the secondary source. So it goes very deep. It's very rich in its description capability. There's a whole host of visualizations that you can do that show the interactions between people. And importantly, it surfaces the issues that you may want to take action on to improve the information flow between stakeholders that need to collaborate. It also will help you identify the consequence of a failed information flow or a failed task in terms of the risk or goal that won't be addressed or achieved. Another visualization is looking at the flows of information of a particular discrete element of information and helping you determine whether it's going to reach the decision maker fast enough. Maybe you need to bypass an intermediary to get that information to the recipient sooner. And this kind of analysis can also help you realize that there are people collecting information or disseminating information that no one downstream is actually using. So this is not modeling for modeling's sake. This is modeling to improve decision making and to enhance the ability for an organization or a network of organizations to, achieve their goals or mitigate risks collaboratively. So we envision that in the future, a server that houses these protocols about people's information needs and will be serving that information out to people, guiding them, not only someone new in their job, but someone in an operational environment which is extremely complex, where their activities need to take into account what other people are doing. So, and then of course, the system could also serve this information to machines and to applications that make use of it in order to customize the presentation of information based on, again, an analysis of the needs of each discrete stakeholder, taking into account their dependencies on others. And this can take a mobile format as well. We prototyped a mobile application for this. So that is a quick overview of our approach, some of the way we think about information flow and knowledge management. And I'm happy to go deeper into any particular area or discuss particular dimensions of knowledge management, depending on what the participants in this webinar would like. Any questions? Jake?
I'm good for questions right now.
Okay. You'd like the bomb threat screenshot. Okay, yeah, there are others like that in use cases, sure. I can show, carefully, I can show a few generic things. I want to identify the source, just to give you a sense of how scenarios could be utilized in this. Give me a moment. I'll pull up some slides from an exercise that is relevant in light of what happened in Boston. So scenarios are a great way to get a group to think about how they need to interact. And is my screen visible? It should be.
Yes, we can see it.
So scenarios are great ways to get a group to think about how they need to share information, what knowledge they need to share, who has that knowledge, and so forth. So in a past project, we developed a scenario that describes the activities of a cell of terrorists that is planning an attack. And the participants in this process are given the opportunity to react to these slides and describing the scenario and indicate how they're going to find out about it and what information they're going to need in order to perform the tasks that they're expected to perform, and how that information should be communicated and how quickly, and to tell the group what they're supposed to do according to policy, what they think they would actually do, which may be different, and in hindsight, after viewing the scenario, indicating what they believe they should have done. So that is a very powerful mechanism for getting a group to think through how they need to interact. Thanks for your question or comment. Oops. Any other questions? I want to make sure people have a chance to probe deeper into what we do and the kind of problems we've seen with accessing knowledge and information and data. Maybe I'll add another example. So a few years ago, there was a tragic loss of life in Chile. There was an earthquake, and it caused a tsunami. And the tsunami was under the ground, not at sea or under sea. But nevertheless, the earthquake caused a tsunami, and the Chilean Navy seismographical office tried to notify the office, the National Emergency Management Agency, ONEMI, in Chile. But although they tried to communicate, the message was not received, not for technological reasons, but because there was a lack of understanding on the part of ONEMI about the implications of the message that was provided. And sadly, I think 500 or so people lost their lives because they were not told to evacuate the shoreline communities. Obviously, here on the east coast of the United States, we've had our own Superstorm Sandy, and its tragic, devastation and loss of life. So the interactions and information flow is clearly in need of improvement, and the technology element can always be strengthened. The infrastructure for information flow and collaboration, sharing access to knowledge can always be improved, needs to be made more resilient. But achieving effective collaboration is more than just about the technology. My friend and professional colleague, Robert Dissemination, an author on an important book on interoperability, talks about holistic interoperability. And what that means is that the participants in a collaborative process need to trust each other and have the capability to achieve a common outcome. And the technology that enables that is essential, but it's just one element of that. I think that I'll just make one more comment, and then if there are no questions, we should probably close. I think that knowledge management technology is evolving in a very interesting way with semantic web technology. And I see a lot of potential in that. We're doing some interesting work with ontologies, and I'm going to be doing more of that in the future. Tim, interesting, it reminds you of rules around automated data governance. You're absolutely right. I just want to reiterate that the rules for interaction between people in an organization need to encompass interactions that cannot be automated, as well as interactions that are mediated through machines or that are machine to machine. Thank you very much for your time. I hope it's been interesting to you, and I welcome any opportunities to work together.
I'd also like to thank you so much for doing this presentation, David. We really appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure. All the best.
And of course, I'd also like to say that while everyone's here, to please join us next Thursday for another KM KSU webinar. So keep looking at the wiki, and there will be a shout out probably on Monday.